Welcome to our US Briefing Show. Today, we're diving into some gripping stories from around the globe. First up, in Israel, families of hostages held by Hamas are voicing deep mistrust in their government's efforts to free their loved ones. Despite ongoing negotiations, frustration boils over as some hostages have been killed, and political divides hinder a unified rescue plan. Protesters demand a new approach, emphasizing that even partial releases could spark hope. Next, in the Middle East, the ceasefire in Syria's southern city of Sweida is fragile but holding, with tribal forces withdrawing after intense clashes. However, tensions remain high due to Israeli airstrikes and regional instability. Meanwhile, Gaza's ongoing violence continues to threaten civilians, with international actors calling for calm while fears of regional chaos grow. The situation remains complex, with humanitarian crises and power struggles still unresolved. Finally, in Japan, political upheaval is on the horizon. Exit polls suggest the ruling coalition might lose its majority in the upper house, marking a historic shift. Rising inflation, societal tensions over immigration, and economic concerns are fueling opposition gains. Plus, across the Pacific, the U.S.'s trade policies in Southeast Asia are shifting, with increased reliance on China and a potential high-level U.S.-China summit on the horizon. Stay tuned as these stories develop. Please continue to watch for more details. Deutsche Welle reports on the ongoing heartbreak and mistrust among Israeli families whose loved ones remain hostages in Gaza, 21 months after Hamas's brutal attacks. Protesters in Jerusalem, symbolized by yellow ribbons and numbered stickers representing days since the abduction, voiced their despair and frustration over the perceived inaction of Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu. The tragic story of Carmel Gat, kidnapped during Hamas's incursion and found dead after 328 days, exemplifies the peril hostages face and fuels calls for a deal. Supporters like Gil Dickman criticize Netanyahu for prioritizing political selection over human lives, while families like Yehuda Cohen express deep distrust in their government, hoping instead for U.S. intervention. The cultural ethos of "no one is left behind" clashes with what many see as a government more committed to land and security than human life, raising urgent questions about Israel's future and moral compass amid ongoing negotiations and political turmoil. Deutsche Welle also covers the volatile situation in Syria, where tribal conflicts threaten stability in Sweida, a region torn between Druze and Bedouin factions. After a week of fierce clashes, a U.S.-brokered ceasefire has brought cautious calm, with Bedouin militias withdrawing and Syrian government forces reasserting control. Syrian interim president Ahmad al-Shara urges tribes to honor the truce, warning that Israeli strikes and external influences have pushed the country into a dangerous phase. Meanwhile, U.S. Secretary of State Marco Rubio calls on Damascus to prevent ISIS and jihadist attacks, emphasizing the importance of restoring order and trust among Syria's diverse communities. The region remains tense, with violence, political maneuvering, and international concern mounting. In Gaza, the humanitarian crisis worsens as Israeli forces kill dozens near aid hubs, with hospitals overwhelmed by those seeking food amidst a tight blockade supported by Israel and the U.S. The situation underscores the complex web of conflict, political interests, and human suffering that continues to grip the Middle East. CNN reports that Japan's political landscape is on the brink of upheaval as exit polls indicate the ruling Liberal Democratic Party, LDP, and its coalition partner Komeito are poised to lose their majority in the upper house, with forecasts suggesting they will secure only 32 to 51 seats out of 248. This potential defeat comes after their worst showing in 15 years in the October lower house election, intensifying pressure on Prime Minister Shigeru Ishiba, whose government is already fragile. Voters are increasingly concerned about inflation, especially rising rice prices, and are favoring opposition parties advocating tax cuts and stricter immigration policies. The election results threaten to complicate Japan's economic strategies amid looming trade negotiations with the United States, which could impose tariffs if a deal isn't struck by August 1, further exacerbating the country's economic vulnerabilities. South China Morning Post highlights the shifting dynamics of Southeast Asia's development landscape amid declining Western aid and the resurgence of China's influence. As the US and EU slash billions from their foreign aid budgets, US aid dropping by approximately $60 billion, the region's infrastructure financing is increasingly gravitating toward Beijing, which is now the largest non-concessional lender in Southeast Asia. China's investments, including high-speed rail projects in Vietnam and Thailand, are expanding rapidly, reflecting Beijing's strategy of non-interference and no political strings attached. Meanwhile, Western countries are reducing their development support, with promises of aid cuts totaling over $40 billion, leading to a decline in overall regional development finance and increasing dependency of poorer nations like Cambodia, Laos, and Myanmar on Chinese funding. This shift risks transforming Southeast Asia into a zone of infrastructure reliance rather than a hub of strategic, mutually beneficial partnerships. The Lowy Institute's report underscores how Western aid withdrawal is elevating China's role as Southeast Asia's primary infrastructure financier. With the U.S. planning to cut aid by 83% this year and European countries implementing multi-billion-dollar reductions, China's non-concessional loans have surged by nearly 50%, supporting major projects such as the Jakarta-Bandung high-speed railway and the East Coast Rail Link. Countries like the Philippines and Vietnam are engaging with China selectively, aligning projects with their national priorities, while less developed nations like Cambodia and Myanmar remain heavily dependent on Chinese funding due to limited alternatives. This trend signifies a regional shift from traditional Western partnerships to a Chinese-led infrastructure race, risking economic distortions and dependency, and challenging the region's long-term development prospects as Western support continues to wane. The South China Morning Post reports that the upcoming APEC summit in South Korea presents a prime opportunity for a potential meeting between President Xi Jinping and former President Donald Trump, with speculation swirling around whether they will meet on the sidelines or beforehand in China. Despite uncertainties about Trump's participation, recent diplomatic gestures, such as Xi's invitation to Trump for a visit and the first face-to-face meeting between Chinese Foreign Minister Wang Yi and U.S. Secretary of State Marco Rubio, signal a cautious yet hopeful effort to stabilize U.S.-China relations. Analysts believe that any direct interaction could help ease tensions, especially on contentious issues like trade, tariffs, and Taiwan, with experts emphasizing the importance of creating a conducive atmosphere for dialogue. However, geopolitical challenges, such as Taiwan transit controversies and internal U.S. political hawkishness, could jeopardize the prospects of a summit, with some cautioning that even a small misstep might derail these delicate diplomatic negotiations. The South China Morning Post also details the troubling case of an American government worker detained in China, highlighting the opaque and often arbitrary nature of China's exit bans. The individual, a naturalized U.S. citizen with ties to the U.S. Commerce Department, was detained in Chengdu after visiting relatives and reportedly held for failing to disclose his employment on his visa application, though the exact reasons remain unclear. His passport was confiscated but later returned, illustrating the unpredictable and often prolonged nature of such restrictions, which are rooted in Beijing's national security concerns. This case marks a rare instance of a U.S. government-affiliated person being targeted, raising alarms about the broader use of exit bans as leverage in U.S.-China diplomatic tensions. Western officials and human rights advocates criticize these measures as arbitrary and opaque, often used to pressure individuals involved in civil disputes or sensitive issues, further complicating diplomatic relations and international business travel. Meanwhile, the Associated Press reports that Texas Republicans are actively redrawing congressional districts with former President Trump's encouragement, aiming to create more favorable seats ahead of the 2026 elections. This redistricting effort is part of a broader strategy to maintain GOP control in the face of demographic shifts and potential legal challenges, with some districts being carefully manipulated to include more Republican voters while risking violations of the Voting Rights Act. The process has sparked political tensions, including Democratic threats of legislative walkouts to block the redistricting, and highlights the high-stakes nature of gerrymandering in shaping future political power. Trump's push to redraw the map is driven by his desire to secure a strong Republican foothold in Texas, a state that remains a battleground despite recent gains by Democrats. However, aggressive redistricting carries legal risks and could backfire if it violates civil rights protections, adding a layer of complexity to the already contentious political landscape in Texas and beyond. Thank you for tuning in. The content above showcases the latest briefing reports and analytical synopses, thoughtfully curated by the 6Do team. These insights stem from a wide array of reputable media outlets, think tanks, government sources, and specialized experts worldwide. We encourage you to explore these sources for a comprehensive perspective. Keep in mind that while the content may not always align with the official standpoint of 6Do Brief, it's not meant to be taken as absolute directives for decision-making. Comprising seasoned media professionals, learned scholars, and accomplished scientists, the 6Do team embodies a trailblazing, fully independent media entity. To customize 6Do Brief to meet your professional needs, you have the option to subscribe to a diverse array of briefings on our website, 6dobrief.com. Regardless of your location, you can conveniently receive 6Do Brief via email.